Let's move on to some education, because education policy think tank Africa Education Watch says they've identified a syndicate trading exam questions for cash using social media platforms. The findings were launched in Accra today and captures how the syndicate creatively target OWASI candidates and supply them with questions, and in some cases answer many hours before the examination. Exam administrators, WAEC, in recent reaction to news of such leakages, have defended their systems and reported issues where compromises were confirmed to police. Well, Africa Education Watch says the problem is bigger than earlier thought, with highly organized groups targeting candidates. Executive Director Kofi Asare has just joined me in the studio for this conversation. Good to see you, Kofi.
Good afternoon.
Not so long ago, you were here to talk about issues affecting education. Now, this issue of leakages has been on the table for a while, and the last time you raised it, WAEC came to defend it. What has your report or your monitoring revealed this time around?
Well, our monitoring report from 50 schools and 30 different Telegram and WhatsApp platforms on which questions were sold for between 30 cedis to 150 cedis reveals that the questions market is actually a brisk business. It's a multi-million cedi business where question marketers get questions. According to them, they get them from the printing press of WAEC, and then they sell the questions to students and whoever is ready to pay through mobile money and buy them. So our team, apart from monitoring the conduct of students on the ground, was also involved in the monitoring of the sales and marketing of questions on Telegram platforms and on WhatsApp platforms. And indeed, we paid for about 14 papers on 3 different platforms. And out of the questions that we paid for, a significant of them were delivered. Indeed, out of 20 papers monitored, 55% of the questions were delivered to us in good time.
Okay.
Questions were delivered between 106 hours to 1 hour before the examination. I'm talking about 5 days, between 5 days to the paper, and then 1 hour to the start of the paper. This is significant because WAEC has always maintained that questions were only circulating from schools, from examination centers, whenever the question pack was opened. That is not true.
Okay.
It is not true because close to midnight, before midnight, around 11 o'clock, when we got the questions for elective mathematics, no center could have been operating at that time.
Okay.
And that, so we see that repeatedly shifting, denying that questions are not leaking at dawn or are not leaking days before the papers is only an act to escape blame or responsibility and push responsibility to the teachers or to the schools, and also water down on a situation that is much, 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 much bigger than we've been made to believe.
So earlier, the suspicion was between the police and those who were going to circulate the news, the exams papers. But now you're suggesting that it could be coming from WAEC itself.
The questions are not leaking from the schools.
Okay.
What is happening in the schools is that some schools have WhatsApp platforms where immediately the question packs are opened, teachers on standby solve the questions, put them on WhatsApp platforms, and students have their phones inside and they're copying.
Oh, wow. In the exams hall?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and in WAEC statement on the 15th September, I will give it to WAEC. They admitted that they have seen that.
Okay.
That is what WAEC, in their own words, called institutionalized cheating, involving everyone involved, including the WAEC officer.
Okay.
But if you want to diagnose the issue of examination questions leakage, and you listen to that rendition, you'll be tempted to believe that by curbing that menace at the examination hall level, you will solve the problem. But you won't solve the problem because the questions are leaking days before the actual paper, and not minutes before the actual paper.
Okay.
So that particular chapter is a defensive one just to escape blame. But we are not interested in escaping blame or apportioning blame. We are interested in finding out where questions are leaking.
Okay.
On the basis that if you don't understand where the questions are leaking from, you cannot prefers solutions, operational, administrative, policy solutions to the issue. You'll be doing a wrongful diagnosis of the situation. That's why we are saying that per this research we conducted in 2020 WASI, questions are not leaking from the schools. They are leaking at a time that questions are fully in the custody of WAEC at the examination depots. But our conversation with the people run most of these platforms, these WhatsApp platforms and Telegram platforms, suggests that they have been getting their questions from the printing houses. And these printing houses are printing houses run by WAEC themselves.
So the last time WAEC also admitted that there were some exams malpractices in some schools and they were going to investigate. What has happened to that, do you know?
Yes, we know. We met WAEC and Parliament and the GES and the Ministry of Education 2 weeks ago to present our report to them. And WAEC corroborated 90% of our findings.
Wow.
Including WAEC themselves identifying schools where teachers were teaching on blackboards the entire candidates in the examination. So the examination hall was just like a classroom session where the teacher was teaching.
Wow.
Yes, and WAEC provided the evidence. That's what they also saw. I said, okay, good. Because we also saw similar things, including videos of schools where cheating was actually supervised by the school authorities, including the security men, external invigilators from WAEC, and the school authorities.
Quite interesting.
So I think that we have spent too much time on whether there are leakages or not.
Now I think we should agree
the system lacks
that
integrity. The system lacks credibility. And so we must begin to have discussions around a systemic solution to this challenge and not ad hoc solutions. Okay. Systemic. We need the Ministry of Education at this point will have to be seriously in developing a roadmap for a systemic reform, a holistic reform of the assessment sector. But that's why.
But even before you talk about these reforms and your recommendations, did WAEC tell you how they handle these issues that we've mentioned?
In the meeting with the Parliament and the stakeholders, including Charles and everyone, they indicated that they were going to prosecute them. And we are of the view that beyond prosecution, we need to name and shame some of these people. Because if people realize that if you engage in such acts and you are caught, you will be first shamed. You know, that one alone will serve as much more deterrent to them than the prosecution. Because when it comes to the prosecution, I can bet on you that when it comes to matters of evidence, you may end up leaving most of them. That's why in all the prosecutions that AG or the police have been doing for WAEC, the success rate, the conviction rate is very low. Okay. It's in single digits.
Yeah, but interestingly, you also went to the police to report this matter of leakages, and you asked for investigations by the police. What has come of that?
Well, we submitted a first petition to the Director General CID about 5 weeks ago, and after 10 days, we went and then provided a second batch of information to augment the first one, to assist the police in do the investigation. Our follow-up with the police indicates that the matter has been forwarded to the cybercrime unit, and then they are investigating the matter, still working on it. While we have absolute confidence, in the ability and the credibility of the police to deal decisively with the matter. The police action will end up getting people who were responsible for selling questions, right? Okay. But that will not solve the question. Okay. Because the problem is that if there are no leaks, there won't be any product to sell. These guys are wholesale.
Okay, so we need to get it from the root.
Exactly.
And that could be from WAEC itself.
Exactly. And WAEC itself admits that in times past that people have been caught selling questions. They have never disclosed their source at WAEC. Okay, so it means that prosecution is good. It deters others from participating in the same enterprise tomorrow. But it is not part of the sustainable solution. The sustainable solution are efforts that are aimed at identifying the exact source of leakage, whether it is happening at the printing house, at the point where questions are packed, at the point where questions are transported from Accra to the depots or at the depots, but it is not in the schools.
Okay, so in trying to resolve this whole issue, which you say shouldn't be just prosecution, but digging deep to find the root causes, I'm sure there's also in there the question about what could be accounting for this? Why do students want to copy? Why do people want to get exams questions? Elsewhere, you don't hear this kind of story. What could be accounting for this? And addressing that could be a solution to what we are fighting right now.
Exactly. That is correct. In our recommendations, apart from the policy level recommendations, we appreciate that there are sociological factors. There are behavioral factors that needs to change. The first contributory factor from the demand side of the equation is the high stakes nature of our examination system, our external examination system, or our summative examination system. If you don't get A1 to C6 in Ghana, you are virtually seen as useless because you cannot progress in any way along your career path.
Okay.
That is how the system has been designed. Someone gets C7 and is able to go to university in Australia or US. Okay. But if you don't get between A1 and C6, you are done. Okay? So because of that, that WASSCE examination is high stakes. The stakes are high. That I will not invest in my child's education from kindergarten 1 and only after 14 years be told that he has failed. So at any cost, you have to pass.
So is there a problem with our education structure?
The problem is with the assessment structure.
Okay.
This assessment structure we are running is a colonial one, which is based on testing one's cognitive abilities.
Okay.
It does not test your aptitudes. It tests only your cognitive ability.
Okay.
So it is mainly based on recall. WAEC examinations are mainly based on recall. They are hardly applied. And so if you are testing someone based on their cognitive abilities alone, you are doing restrictive testing. The person had failed because he couldn't solve a quadratic equation. Yes. But what else does the person know?
Okay.
What is the person's strength? What else, how useful again can the person be? Be interested in testing their aptitude, not just cognitive development.
Okay.
So this system is actually old-fashioned. If you go to countries like Finland, they are doing 100% participatory assessments. They are not doing tests.
Okay.
If you go to Scotland and other countries, they are doing 50-50. Class work. I'm not talking about class exam.
Okay.
Class project work.
Okay.
Participation in class. Even your behavior and attitude.
And so
all
that
comes together
involves
50.
a lot more practical
That is 50.
than actually doing the theory.
Exactly, 50. Then the remaining 50 will go for the exam.
Okay.
So the stress involved in the high-stake examination is reduced because 50 of your marks is obtained from the school.
Yeah.
So if you are in a school where you are doing 50 assessments, your teacher is undertaking teacher-based assessment. So you are going to take your classes seriously.
Yep.
You are not going to use mobile phones on campus because you know your teacher is determining among others 50% of your results.
Okay.
But where it is 30-70, even the person who taught has limited control over assessing what they taught you. So that is one reason. The second reason is the high cost of remedial schooling.
Okay.
Apart from last year, up to 40%, up to 60% of WASSCE candidates were always having at least failure in one of the core subjects, which meant that 60% of candidates were always remedial candidates. I hope you are getting me.
Yeah.
It was only last year that 50% had passes in all the 4 core. But even for last year, 50%. It means that about 200,000 students are remedial candidates because they have to rewrite one once you get more than C6. If you want to do 2 subjects at action, at a school like Ideal College, you'll be spending about 5,000 cedis to 6,000 cedis a year for the year just to write 2 subjects.
2 subjects.
Including feeding and accommodation. In rural areas where learning outcomes are very poor, students who fail examination have to come to Accra and Kumasi and pay high costs for their children to go to remedial education. Now, that 6,000 you'll be paying for remedial schooling is the same, it's more than the amount that government pays for your free senior high school for the entire 3 years.
Yeah.
So not teachers, but parents and students, in a bid to avoid the cost of remedial schooling, invest, among others, in negative ways, buy questions, buy phones for their students and for their children, and encourage them to do anything possible to pass. That is why the teachers, when we met Parliament, Chas was saying, and indeed they didn't say it because we know that it's difficult to identify a student in Ghana here that doesn't own a phone. Maybe unless minus Wesley Girls and then St. Louis. It is difficult.
Okay.
What happens is that if you seize a student's phone today, the next day they have another one.
Okay.
They have backups. Yes, and so you should know that the amount of investment going into buying phones, especially in final year, are not investment that the child themselves, the children themselves can fund. There is a backing from home.
From the parents.
That's why we see that the high cost of remedial education is a contributory factor.
Okay.
Now, these are the demand side, the factors that lead students to demand for this question. The supply side is that there's an opportunity in WIEC's system.
Okay.
There's an opportunity in WIEC's question security system, and people are taking advantage of it to do business.
Of course. So definitely looking at the assessment structure, that could be a long-term something that we need to improve. But in the interim, and I'm happy you mentioned that if there's no questions or if there's no something for somebody to sell, there will be nothing for them to sell. Yeah. And the students will take their work seriously and will not go and look for phones to back up. So in your report, what were the recommendations to deal with some of these challenges?
We have recommended first that the Ministry of Education must institute an independent probe, a surgical knife inquiry into the source of this year's examination, syndicate.
Okay.
It shouldn't be left to pass under the bridge as usual. Something different must happen this year. The second thing is that the Ministry of Education must come out with a clear road plan through a consultative process with stakeholders. Now, this roadmap must indicate the ministry's intention, plans, and strategies to overhaul the assessment system. Note that we are not only intercepting WASI questions. We are intercepting questions from NAPTEX and the COTVET.
Okay.
Social studies and English, we intercepted them from this same question set. It means that it is not a WIEC issue. It is an issue within the assessment system, which is about questions integrity, question security. So the ministry must come up with a comprehensive roadmap through consultative processes with stakeholders about how it intends to decisively and holistically reform the assessment sector. It is not just a matter of just saying that we are going to introduce serialization of questions. That is an ad hoc solution. It is a good solution, but an ad hoc one. It is not systemic, and it will not survive the system because the system is leaky, the system lacks integrity, and so anything you build on it will not survive.
Yeah.
The third thing is that moral society, religious bodies, traditional authorities. So at the launch today, the chief imam was represented. The religious bodies, all the religious bodies were represented. Parents were represented. We need to launch a national campaign against examination malpractices, targeting the attitudes of students. Students now believe that they have the entitlement to cheat, to the extent that when an academic headmaster of Osetutu Senior High School prevented students from cheating, immediately after the examination, they destroyed his plantain farm. when students at Ninahini Senior High School were not allowed to do the normal in an examination, immediately the examination ended. They burnt their whole dormitory down. So the entitlement to cheat syndrome mindset must change, and it will take a lot of process because it seems our students are learning about corruption in school instead of what they went to school to learn. It will take a holistic effort from the clergy, from the cathedral, from our mosques, through to our homes, and then to our schools. Everybody must be involved in this national campaign. So we have thrown it to the moral society stakeholders that it is time for us to initiate strategies that will change the moral psyche of our students, because at present, the norm for senior high school students is that once I'm going to school, I need to get questions. I need to have a phone, plug in on Telegram, buy my questions and pass. That is not an exception. It is now a norm. And so people are being assessed on different levels. One group of students have foreknowledge of the questions. The others are genuinely hardworking students who are learning, passing. You cannot assess students on such unequal or unfair basis and expect any stakeholder, internally or externally, to call such a system credible.
And indeed, we've spoken with WIEC, which is center in this whole thing, and it says it is studying your report and it will speak on it later. But again, what's the plan for implementation beyond the launch? Because you've made a lot of recommendations that will help resolve the issues that we are dealing with. But I mean, submitting the report to Ministry of Education, all the stakeholders, doesn't really solve the problem. Implementation of those recommendations will. How do you intend to push for that?
We are engaging a lot of stakeholders. As I mentioned, we've already met with Parliament. We've met with the headmasters. We've met with WIEC. We've met with the GES, the Minister of Education at one forum. And we presented our recommendations to them. Most of the members of Parliament made input into our recommendations. And we were happy that Parliament was interested in also contributing to strengthening accountability and the relevance and credibility of our free tertiary assessment system.
Okay.
What we are doing from the launch is that we're going to begin having one-on-one meetings, especially with the ministry. Look, all we are discussing is about the Ministry of Education.
Okay.
Last year, when the leakages occurred, teacher unions made noise, everybody was making noise. The ministry never heard about the noise.
Okay.
They never heard about the noise. But immediately the results were released, they were the first to publish in the graphic that we've had the highest WASSCE score. The inertia is our issue. The only agency that can initiate these reforms is the ministry. So we are going to start having one-on-one discussions with the Ministry of Education. We are happy that the minister has made comments that indicate that government is ready to reform the system and strengthen it. But we are at variance in respect of the approach, because the ministry believes that bringing serialization of questions will solve the matter. And we believe that you can't just bring serialization of questions and solve any matter, because questions will still leak. Just that the possibility of the one leaking getting to being the one I'm going to write is what will reduce. But we want to build a system that has integrity. There should not be any leakage of questions in Ghana. And that shouldn't be impossible.
Thankfully, we are joined by Kwesi Kwarteng, who is spokesperson for the Education Ministry. I mean, your ministry has a lot to do with regards to some of the issues that have been discussed here. First of all, I want to find out from you, have you seen that report, the Education Monitoring report, which identifies that there's a syndicate trading exam questions for cash? All right, so we've lost Kwesi Kwarteng there. We'll try and get him back, because he has to answer some of the questions.
So it is only the ministry that can initiate the reforms. And so all we hope to do is that we hope to ride on the back of the political will that we have secured from this government to do something about what has been there since, according to some of them, they started selling the questions on Telegram since 2013.
Okay.
So what has been there and hasn't been resolved or hasn't been attended to because it benefits some people since 2013. If the will to do something about it is there, we can only capitalize on that will and demand for even more or far-reaching holistic reforms that would reform the system and not just an aspect of the system, so that we can be assured that we are dealing with this problem decisively once and for all. We are digitizing questions transmission from WIEC to the schools and cutting out all the human element involvement.
All the human elements involved. Kwesi Kwarteng has joined us back. He's a spokesperson for the Education Ministry. My question was whether you've seen this document, the report from EduWatch monitoring of the exams, and the revelations that there's been syndicates trading exam questions for cash.
Hello, Aisha.
Yes, Kwesi Kwarteng.
Can you respectfully repeat your question?
Okay, so I'm asking if you've seen that report by EduWatch, the monitoring report, and it has cited a lot of malpractices and exam leakages, question leakages in the exams. And it's also identified that there's a syndicate that is trading exam questions. So where do they get the questions from and all of that in that report? Have you seen that report?
Okay, a very good afternoon to you once again, Aisha, and to my brother Kofi and all your viewers and listeners. Apparently, your producers just sent me the report, but I think generally, for me, it's a conversation about exams leakages, and then largely how, as a country or as a people, as a ministry, we are able to, at the end of the day, have a more robust system so that we'll be able to deal with some of these challenges that keep occurring every year. Of course, I mean, we do admit, and if you listen to the Minister of Education, at every level, at all points, he's made an admission that this problem has been with us. And I mean, describe the problem as even a systematic one or systemic problem, where it predates even back, even before WASSCE came into being or WIEC came into being. And so generally we have that problem. And of course, I mean, if you look at some of the reasons that has been ascribed to it, I mean, my brother Kofi on even several platforms has agreed with me that as a country, we overly focuses on training our students just to go and write exams. And so it's a more reason why in the long term we are looking at training students that will be assertive, that will be problem solvers, that will not necessarily focus on just being trained to go and write exams, but they will be trained to fix problems. And that's where the minister's drive comes in, and of course the president's educational transformation agenda. But that is in the long term. But of course, in the short term, we are looking at also, closing all the bottlenecks that are associated with this whole issue about exams leakage. But Aisha, before I proceed, I think we have to also get some distinction clear here. If you look at, that is not in a way to suggest that there are some of the instances or some of the cases that we hear about examination leakages are not entirely genuine. But most of the times, we have to separate issues of leakages probably even from malpractices. Because sometimes a student gets into the exam hall and probably is able to sneak a phone inside the exam hall and take a picture of his exam papers. And certainly is a malpractice, and you see such a question on the internet. Of course, today certainly as soon as you put something on social media, it just travels viral. When you see such a question, even though the students are in the exam room writing that very same paper, it is seen as probably a leakage, or it is construed as a leakage. I think that should be separated, or that act of malpractice should probably be separated from the real leakage problem that we have. Again, there is also another leg of the problem where you have rogue individuals, like Kofi mentioned, a syndicate. Because it's a syndicate clearly because WAEC is supposed to be in charge of the questions. WAEC doesn't work with them in a vacuum. They work with human beings. They don't work with robots. They work with human beings. You have the security. You have GS officials. You have a whole lot of people in that examination conducting chain. So the question is, how then do this leak? But you see, the problem goes beyond just how do you call it, being very simplistic. I have always said, and the Minister of Education have always insisted, that every activity that you have a lot of human interface in that activity, you are likely to have some of these problems. It is a more reason why recently, Kofi was there, in Kofi was there, myself were there. We met the Parliamentary Select Committee on Education, together with the Ministry of Education, the Honorable Minister, the Deputy Honorable Minister of Education, Reverend Tim Pojo was also there. All of us collectively, together with other stakeholders like WAEC, finding a long-lasting solution to it. And so the proposal that, of course, came was serialization, which means that, if we set questions, we can probably have about 20 sets of different questions in one particular room, so that the incentive, the drive to even leak the questions will not be, because at the end of the day, if one leaks, nobody knows that is the one that is going to write.
But there's a bigger issue with the assessment structure, which actually is paving the way for people to want to cheat and buy exam questions so that they can pass the examination. Now, is there a roadmap to reform the external assessment sector so that we can have a finality to this?
Yes, so Aisha, yes, the problem even goes beyond assessment, because at the end of the day, any form of assessment, if you see, the human mind is naturally, organically, negatively biased, to the extent that if you provide the right environment, right circumstance, everything right for the person to indulge in anything that satisfies the person, especially when the person compromises, then certainly the person is likely to go in that direction. And so for me, it even goes beyond that. Because at the end of the day, whatever assessment system, whether it's a physical assessment, it's a oral assessment, it's a racial assessment, you will still have people compromising it. So what you do is to put systems that are in place, or you put systems in place that will demotivate or uninspire situations where people will even want to cheat.
And what's the system that the Education Ministry intends to put in place?
We are engaging WAEC. We've started a conversation about serialization. We are also looking at in the long term, doing something like electronic, how do you call it, testing, where just like we've had in other countries, where you log on beside your computer, you are biometrically verified, the computer is scanning you as you write your exams. As soon as probably you turn your neck to a certain radius, maybe beyond a certain radius, the exams cut by default. there are systems that is monitoring. That is in the long term what we should be looking at. In the short term, I mean, serialization has come out stronger.
But the question is, Kwesi, will the serialization end the leakage?
So you see, the whole point is about, like I said the premise very properly. That the premise is about trying to reduce the human interface, and you use the model that probably is closer to curing the problem. Of course, every model that you use may have its own challenges. If you want to debate whatever model that anybody or any other person will bring up. But you see, if you look at other countries, I mean, we shouldn't even go far. Let's even go into our universities. When I was in the university, I remember we wrote an exam, the thesis paper, and all the questions were serialized. There were about 10 different sets of questions. And so when you turn your left, certainly you do not know the question that somebody is having. But of course, these questions are set within the context of the same syllables that we are using. And so we believe that in the short term, even if it's not able to cure the entire problem, certainly it's going to reduce it. But I mean, Aisha, you asked a very important question about also the how we are trying to reduce this whole how do you call it, training students to just be exams oriented. If you look at the new curriculum that has been implemented from the standard-based one, which has been implemented, of course, I mean, when you look at the common core one at the JHS level, which is also be implemented, you see that it removes that element of examination. Of course, I mean, it doesn't also mean that the national standardization text will not come off. It will come off, and it's coming off. But that element of overly training or training students to be overly reliant on just going to write exams without being assertive, without being critical thinkers, without being problem solvers, especially in this fourth industrial revolution. I mean, it is something that, I mean, if you look at the reforms that the Honorable Minister of Education, Dr. Educhum, has initiated, these are all curing some of the problems that we've inherited and is being with us for some time now. So for me, I mean, we come to Ghanaians to admit that, yes, I mean, we have a problem. We have a problem in our whole educational landscape. That is the whole reason why we have always been saying that we have to reimagine. We have to rethink how we do our exams. We have to re-look at how exams is conducted in this country. We have to re-look at how we are training our students so that at the end of the day, are we training them to be exams-oriented or to be problem solvers? I mean, these are all conversations that we are having. These are all issues that we are addressing as a ministry. Of course, it's not going to end in one day, but we are very optimistic that, of course, under the leadership of the able Minister, Honorable Dr. Educhum, we should be able to make strides at the end of the day.
I'm grateful for your time. Kwesi Kwarteng, spokesperson for the Education Ministry. Now, you've heard the Ministry of Education, and they say they are aware of the problems, but they are taking it one after the other. I mean, do we have that patience?
I don't think we are in a rush at all. As I mentioned, we appreciate that we have some political will to build the momentum and initiate far-reaching systemic reforms. The minister, and I've discussed this issue severally with the minister, and he believes that serialization is one of the short-term measures that can be taken. I agree with him that serialization can only work within the short term, something we can just start even at BECE next month. Okay. But the challenge we are discussing is a systemic one. Ad hoc solutions will not survive, will not be sustainable. We are here because we have failed to appreciate that this system requires a holistic reform solution, because this is a systemic issue. So what we are saying is that while it is important for us to immediately start serializing questions, we need to have a roadmap, a broad reform strategy for the assessment sector, because serialization will not make WAEC accountable. Serialization will not change the situation where WAEC is the referee, the coach, and the player. Serialization will not bring a regulator to set standards for WAEC, enforce standards, sanction non-compliance to standards. Serialization will not stop the leakage. Okay, so the challenges we are discussing will not be solved through serialization, but serialization will help in the short term as a stopgap measure to try and make it difficult for questions that leak to be easily accessible to students by way of whether or not what I buy is what will come. But the system is still designed on leaky foundations. It lacks systemic integrity, and this systemic deficit will have to be solved by reducing or removing the human element involvement in questions transmission. If you do that and you add serialization, then you are going to have a near perfect system that has integrity. So as we are having discussions about serialization in the immediate term, I think that the ground is fertile for us to do broad stakeholder consultation that should lead to the development of a roadmap to reform the entire assessment sector so that we are not just serializing, we are building institutions that will hold WAEC accountable directly, that will regulate WAEC, set standards, not only for WAEC, because we are seeing NAPTEC questions, it's not WAEC.
Yep.
So that the assessment sector at the tertiary level will now be regulated. Then we are going to have situations where within the assessment sector, the reform that we are craving for, moving more of the assessment to the school level than the test-based, summative process at the end of the day.
And that's where the Cambridge part comes in. And I'm happy that he spoke about the new curriculum and all of that. Let's speak with Timothy Mensah. He's a retired teacher. He taught Cambridge curriculum 20 years, and he joins us with some experiences. Timothy, I'm grateful that you're able to join this conversation. I need you to actually paint a picture of how that curriculum looks and to what extent that can resolve our exam leakages, in Ghana.
Thank you so much. I just want to add up to my learned friend over there, the gentleman over there. What happens is that we are looking at it in totality. But the problem is, let me take it, it's going to be my problem is two with WAEC. You want to pass questions together with schemes, together with exams, the chief exam report. You will not get them. That is number one. Because as a teacher, I need these things to help me to focus. To be on track based on what they are looking for. And the students must also have access to it. That is number one. Number two, imagine you are writing 3 papers in a day. Geography 1, Geography 2, Geography 3. Unbelievable. How is the student going to cope with this? With the curriculum, with the CIE curriculum, you can write a paper, and then you have about 5 or 2 weeks gap to write the second paper, and about another 1 week gap to write the third paper.
Yep.
So should you not do well in the first one, you have the chance to work harder to improve on the other one. But with the one that we are saying with WAEC, they are writing everything on that day. And if you look at the extent of the syllabus, it's huge. How would the student be able, as the gentleman over there said, how is the student will be able to learn everything, cognitive? How is he going to produce it? The student will want to fall on some of these things, to cheat. That is what I'm saying. So I agree with him. We should look at it in totality.
With the period that you have taught this Cambridge curriculum, have you seen exam leakages just like we're seeing with our system?
Not really. You may sometimes hear that there's, even when you hear something like that, they write in different areas. But the problem is that they have some zones, about 3 zones. They write without leakages. And that is what is baffling me. I haven't seen it since we started, like they will say, something has leaked in the school and students are looking for it. I haven't. And that is my worry. So I agree with the gentleman over there that we should look at it in totality. If you don't help the students, in fact, they write mock and you realize that they don't do well. You tell them what to do. You have past questions online. You have examiners report online. You have the scheme online. Within 1 month, you see the change. But you walk to WAEC. I have gone there personally to look for past questions, to look for scheme, and you will not get them.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, they don't build the confidence, and they want to resort to cheating. That is my contribution.
All right. I'm
Thank
grateful for this experience you've shared with us. So Timothy Mensah is a retired teacher. And of course, he's painting exactly or speaking the same language you're speaking.
Yeah, the stress levels are high. There are some papers that between paper 1 and paper 2, you don't go out. For like elective maths. You go and sit for the written, and then immediately you finish, you are continuing with the objective.
So it all comes back to the assessment structure. we need to do something.
You understand why we need to have
that.
a holistic view
about it.
Done and ad hoc situation. Exactly.
But in your meeting with the Ministry of Education, and did you go to Parliament? Did you submit a report to Parliament?
Yes.
What has been the assurances so far with these revelations?
There is a commitment to. There is a commitment. Parliament has indicated that it's ready to support WAEC to review the WAEC law. Again, the reason why WAEC has no regulation is because they are not set up to be regulated. They are set up as a sub-regional body. Okay, not a Ghana body. So if you want to regulate WAEC in Ghana, it's difficult because there are 4 other countries involved.
Which is part of WAEC.
So we have indicated that, look, we need to have standards and have external agencies enforce those standards. And the only way you can get that is to amend their law and then subject them to this regulation. So if it will entail us dealing with only WAEC Ghana, fine, because we cannot, in the name of sub-regional agencies, compromise the quality of our enviable educational system. You know. So yes, I see initiatives being made to review the WAEC law, and then we are going to participate in that process. Whether we're going to participate in that process. Apart from that, also I see, but you see, let's not be too optimistic about Parliament. Parliament has the commitment, and I respect the commitment and the commitment of His Honourable Isiama, the committee chairperson. But 99% of reforming the assessment system, regulating WAEC, demanding accountability from WAEC, people whose job it is to ensure that questions do not leak, being punished for not doing their work well or sleeping on the job, prosecuting offenders, all these actions, the only institution that has the mandate to ensure that they are done is the Ministry of Education. That is why we have said that the ministry must come out with a clear plan on how it intends to reform the system, not just the serialization. It is good to serialize, but the foundation is leaky. If you build any structure on it, it will crumble. So let's look at the entire system holistically, the way government has taken its time for the past 4 years and is reforming the education system holistically. It actually excluded the external assessment system. That is why I was saying the last time that when we had the education sector review meeting, I thought it was a golden opportunity for stakeholders to discuss the issues of examination fraud. Unfortunately, apart from the fact that we were not even invited to participate in the process, it wasn't even an issue. And I was very sad.
That's it.
Because I thought that we missed an opportunity to engage all the stakeholders in the sector, the big boys, quote unquote, converge at one place for a week to think about solutions to, pressing issues in the sector.
And people didn't see that.
The examination fraud did not qualify to be an issue. I was very, very sad. If we were there, that issue would have been discussed by force.
I'm sure that this is a topic that we will keep discussing until, because I'm sure in the next examination, we want to see some improvement. After all these reports, submission and discussions around it, we want to see improvement. If it doesn't happen, we'll keep talking until it happens. But we also hope that Africa Education Watch and the other stakeholders will put the needed pressure on the Ministry of Education to resolve this issue.
But let me quickly indicate that WAEC is not doing everything wrong. 45% of the questions we monitored did not leak. There were circulations, we paid for them, but the questions we got did not appear. It means that if WAEC wants to work, they can work. When the physics leaked, they postponed the paper. When they wrote it again, it never leaked. So
it's all about the willpower to do it. So I think it's something that we'll keep discussing. I'm grateful so much, Kofi Asare. He is Executive Director of Africa Education Watch. Thanks so much for coming to the studio. Let's take a break on the Pulse. Remember, you can join by all our social media handles on JoyNews on TV. You can tweet at us with the hashtag The Pulse. And my personal handle is @Danana Aisha. We're back in a jiffy.